If you look online, a lot of people love Baldur's Gate 3 for many reasons, but there is one certain group that has absolutely adored it, and that is the Dragon Age community, specifically the fans of Dragon Age Origins. And it makes sense why they would like it, because it is, on the surface, very similar to Dragon Age Origins and Bioware games in general. And coupled with this fact is how Bioware hasn't made a game like Dragon Age Origins since its launch in 2009, and has, from the perspective of, Dragon Age Origins fans, went further and further away from what they think Dragon Age is about, which has left Dragon Age Origins fans disappointed by BioWare. Not even speaking about how poorly received Mass Effect Andromeda and Anthem were, BioWare seems to not be able to make the games that they want. All this leading to many fans of Dragon Age Origins to think that Larian would be better at delivering what they want. And I want to answer that question, on if Larian should take over the Dragon Age series. What are the reasons people give and why they want Larian to take over from BioWare? The biggest and most possible reason is that people are disappointed with how BioWare handled Dragon Age. As the series continued, it drifts further and further away from Dragon Age Origins. Now they have in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition voice protagonists, a more action-oriented gameplay, and less choices for the player to make. In contrast to Baldur's Gate 3, which has no voice protagonists, gameplay that is more similar to Dragon Age Origins, and allows so much more player freedom. And Larian, unlike BioWare, seems keen on continuing their style for years to come. There isn't another possibility that they would try to make another Dragon Commander or Divinity 2 Ego Draconis. They seem to be set on just making games that are like Dragon Age Origins forever. And another reason is Dragon Age's setting. For one, people don't like how BioWare handled the setting, saying they retconned lore and turned the series from a dark fantasy to a high fantasy. Now, I do think both those points are wrong. BioWare hasn't retconned anything other than the Qunari not having horns, and the series didn't turn into a high fantasy. It just focused on aspects that weren't as dark. It focused on politics and king making, and didn't really have time to focus on the more nitty gritty stuff that was in Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Origins. But regardless, people still believe that and want Larian to take over because it seems, remember that word, they have a huge respect for the settings that they use. Whether or not you like the Forgotten Realms, it is clear that Larian has a deep love for it. The same must be true if they take over from Dragon Age. The second reason is because people don't particularly like the Forgotten Realms settings as much as Dragon Age settings. Now, I don't know one fact, but I do think the primary reason why people feel like this can be linked to the fact that D&D is primarily a setting rather than a narrative. What I mean is that D&D is a sandbox you play in. The world doesn't have any overall goal or destination. It just exists for you to do whatever you want in it. Anything that is accomplished will revert back to what the sandbox was when you arrived, the status quo, a pile of sand. While Dragon Age has a good setting, it is clear that the narrative takes priority. When changes happen, changes will stick. There isn't any reversion back to the status quo because it doesn't exist anymore. And I think that is why a lot of people like Dragon Age settings a lot more. It has progression, change, and when things change, they change. Forgotten Realms will always stay the same no matter what. The Swords Coast will always be the frontier that many adventurers go to, even though it's been 100 years of it being a frontier. Because what it is something for a D&D group to play in, and do whatever, not to experience a story of the world, but to experience the story of each other. And Dragon Age Origins fans want to see what Larian using that setting would do. They love the setting, and they want to see what Larian can actually have, a setting that can actually change. Also because they think BioWare mishandled the setting. Now those are the big reasons people want Larian to take over Dragon Age, but a question still remains. Would Larian actually make a good Dragon Age game? Most people would give the answer yes, because they liked Baldur's Gate 3, but that doesn't understand what Larian would actually do with Dragon Age. My answer is that they wouldn't make a good Dragon Age game. Let me explain. I'm not saying that they will make a bad game, just a game that isn't like Dragon Age. First off, the gameplay. Funny thing is, Dragon Age isn't a turn-based game. It's a real-time turn-based game with combat and pause. And I think if Larian wanted to make a good Dragon Age game that fans of Origins will like, they will have to retain that. People gave Bioware so many issues because they drifted away from that and into more action-y combat. It wouldn't make sense to give Bioware a headache for that and let Larian go about their business, because part of Dragon Age Origins' identity is its gameplay. To change that would be the same as Bioware changing the gameplay from Dragon Age Origins to Dragon Age Inquisition. Again, Dragon Age Origins' real-time turn-based combat with pause and its whole tactics is vital to its identity. It's what makes it Dragon Age to a lot of Dragon Age Origins fans. Now, a response to this can be said, Larian can make a real-time turn-based combat with pause. It isn't impossible for them to do it. Anyone who says this really shows their ignorance on how games are made. Larian has spent the past 2 games making turn-based combat. That is a total in 8 years just making turn-based games. They would have to basically upend their game engine to make a real-time turn-based combat with pause. Have they made games without turn-based combat? Yeah, sure. They've made the first 2 Divinity games, Divinity 2 Ego Dragos, Dragon Commander, but the difference is those games aren't what they want to make, and also they haven't made those games in years. Again, it's been in total 8 years for them just making turn-based combat games, and they've refined it. This isn't just about them having to retool their engine, it's also about that most of their knowledge, skill set, and experience is with turn-based games. It'll take a long time for them to get it to make it right. Remember when I said Larian seemed to respect the setting they use? Yeah, they kind of don't. It's a bit weird. To explain, Larian does respect the setting that they use, but it isn't the top priority for them. With their series Divinity, they have retconned and contradicted themselves more than once. The biggest example of this is the entire existence of Divinity Original Sin 2. It contradicts so much of the series before it. Things like Lucian being where he is because he's supposed to be dead technically, but he's also not. It's a bit confusing, but Divinity Original Sin doesn't make that clear. It seems like he was fine. And then you have the whole source thing and the issues with that, because in previous games like Divinity 2 Ego Dragos, that wasn't really a thing, or at least a big thing. Then you have things like gods and monsters, and then you have like a whole host of other issues. Now, this also could be contributed that Larian didn't really set out a lore bible or have any codexes for a defined series, but that doesn't excuse the fact that it seems that they're very wishy-washy with their setting. They don't really mind changing a lot of stuff, and it is known that when they got a lot of new writers in for Divinity Original Sin 2, they did change quite a few stuff, because, again, they weren't really well known, and changing stuff wouldn't be as controversial as, for example, Bioware changing anything. And yeah, they wouldn't really mind that because, again, and this is now leading to my next point, which is a bigger issue of Larian, is their design philosophy. Larian, since Divinity Original Sin 2 and somewhat prior, has always prioritized player freedom above everything else. They've always wanted players to be first. Now, to many this is a good thing, but for Dragon Age it doesn't work. The player in Dragon Age has never had a moment of freedom that Larian has offered, for a good reason. Dragon Age Origins' story would not work as well if the player had absolute freedom. For an example, if you were playing as a human noble origin, Larian would allow you to literally kill everyone you wanted. You could kill your family, you could kill Duncan, you could kill the How. While it would be difficult to do, Larian would allow you to do it, and expect you to be able to kill them all. The issue with allowing the player to do this causes the story to change wildly. If you just killed How, that would change quite a bit. Yeah, the human noble would be sent to prison, but with How dead, his army and the army of Highever would be able to march south and be able to stop Ostagar from falling, ruining Logain's plans. From that, you can see how different the game would become, and if you were allowed to do literally anything. Other examples are, what if you just killed Terran Logain when you're facing him at camp? Sure, that would be very terrible and disorganized, but they would still follow through on Logain's plans. They would rush in and flank the Darkspawn, saving Ostagar. Again, there's a lot of reasons that Origins restricts you. This is why Larian's stories account for the player being able to murder anyone they want. Every character has a reduced role because of it. If they were too important, they would devolve into this infinite directions that would take decades to develop. This is why Larian would take decades to develop on. Again, this is why Larian has ways for the player to continue even if you killed everyone you see, and allowing and expecting that does reduce a lot of the roles of these characters. They can't really be anything more than just points that you can engage the story in, because if you can kill them, they have to reduce their role, because if they were important, they would break the main quest. Again, for example, like killing Loghain when you get to Ostagar. It would break quite a bit of the story and a lot of the themes of it. That's why in Baldur's Gate 3, for example, the artifact exists. It not only tells you what to do next, but it also prevents you from just dying instantly. But that doesn't mean, and again, as I said, it doesn't mean that's good. I don't think that's good, at least. There will be, and I want less of that if they take over. What Larian gains in freedom, it loses in narrative weight. If Larian were to make a Dragon Age game, they would not make a Dragon Age Origins 2, because the ideas and goals of Dragon Age Origins and Larian aren't compatible. Dragon Age Origins restricts the player's freedom so it can tell a story. Larian restricts the story so that the player can have freedom. And a response to this is, Larian can learn how to make games like Dragon Age Origins, or Dragon Age Origins would be better if it had absolute freedom. For the first part, Larian clearly has no interest in making games like Dragon Age Origins, and I think forcing Larian into making a game that they don't want to make isn't a good idea. Larian has always made games that they've loved, and what makes them so good is because they have so much passion for them. The last time that they made a game that they didn't like was Divinity 2 Ego Dragos, because before they started self-publishing. Now, the development of the game is a bit murky, but there is a lot to suggest that a lot of the decisions that they were making weren't really their own, and they were very upset about it. After Divinity 2 Ego Draconis released, they nearly went bankrupt, and so they focused on something that they cared about more. The game isn't bad. Divinity 2 Ego Dragos isn't bad by any means, but it is clear that Larian has far more passion and love for the RPGs that they're making now than then. I don't think that they couldn't make a Dragon Age Origins style game, I just think that they wouldn't want to. Their interests lie elsewhere, and that's fine. As for the second part, I don't fucking think that it would be a Dragon Age game then. I don't think Dragon Age should ever do that. Dragon Age offers choices, but choices that enhance the story of the game. It is clear that the priority is characters, story, world, and choices. That's at least how I think of it. The moments I loved the most in Dragon Age were the moments that weren't the moments I can do literally anything, but were when the game offered me a compelling choice. Who do you choose as King of Orzammar? Balin, the man who slaughtered his way to the top but will reform Dwarven society for the better? Or Harrowmont, who may not be the best king in charge, but doesn't set the precedent that killing is a legitimate way of becoming king? That is a meaningful choice to me, and what I want Dragon Age to do. To end this off, I am not opposed to Larian making a Dragon Age game. It would be hypocritical of me if I said that they couldn't make a good Dragon Age game. As I believe the Coalition who make the Gears War of games right now, I think they make excellent Gears of War games, and it's all really great. There's nothing essentialist preventing anyone from making a good Dragon Age game. But I don't think giving Larian Dragon Age is going to lead to a good Dragon Age game. And yeah, I just don't think that Larian would do well with it.